on Denny here, push them out. Denny's ahead by 2 out back. Denny will get the energy behind. Truex, high lane
Hi, I'm Michael Fritz, driver and team owner of the NASCAR Mini Stock number 2 race team at Evergreen Speedway. A good friend of mine would always say that racing requires a good mix of brains and fearlessness. There's drivers that are fearless but are not smart, so they wreck a lot. They have a lot of accidents. Then you have the drivers that have a lot of brains that don't have a lot of accidents but never really win because you have to push the envelope. A driver has to be the best of both. My dad used to race when I was younger, and so since I was 5 or 6 years old, he would take us to the racetrack. And then when I was 8, we moved to Chile, and he started racing himself. And so I'd follow him everywhere he went. My older brother started racing before I did and still races till this day. But you could say that my dad and my brother were the influence for me to get into it as well, yeah. When I moved to the States, when I was 18, I decided to get into it myself. And I probably spend most of my summers, 2 or 3 nights a week at the race shop, working on race cars, getting the car ready for the next race. Motorsports has all types of racing, and it has, rally racing and Formula One racing and open wheel racing and NASCAR and all of these different forms.
As the crowd roar the drivers on to the final lap of this race, and Verstappen sets after Hamilton. Is it going to be a first world championship for Verstappen?
Tag made again. Bubba Wallace sideways. Can he save it?
William Byron, they're ready.
Now the 22 goes around.
Hold the brake, hold the brake, hold the
Oh,
brake.
Carney's going to come out now. Big wreck behind him.
The car preparation is more about that. It's more about the type of surface you're racing at and the type of event that you're going to, not so much what a driver does in terms of preparing, right? As a driver and a team owner, I focus a lot on preparing the car, so I don't have a lot of time to focus on the driving aspect. So a lot of times I show up to the racetrack not having thought about being in the car, not having thought about what the conditions are, who I'm competing against, and what's next. We spend time on the simulator to simulate what that next race is going to be and the conditions of that race, and then the car just has it set up for that. You can't predict what's going to happen on the racetrack, so again, pre-planning never really works. As I mentioned, we don't have a lot of time on the track, so the next best thing is a simulator, so we got this.
The track temp is 40. The air temp is 31 Celsius. The exit looks clear. We need to get some heat into these brakes.
The way it helps me is it puts me in that same mode. The simulation is as real as it gets without being under the stress of a car, and competing with other people in the simulator is just as rewarding. Years ago, I decided that I didn't want to race for other people anymore. I wanted to race for myself. So I built a race team about 10 years ago and recruited many other drivers and crew members to come to my team. Within my crew, I have a crew chief, And that gentleman is sort of the boss of the team at the racetrack and at the shop. I have a spotter. It's a person that's on the radios with me while I'm driving. He's a driver coach and also a spotter to tell me where there's danger points on the racetrack. I have a tire engineer. Essentially, it's a person that manages all of our sets of tires because we only get so many a year, so we have to maximize the usage of those. And then I have family that comes to the racetrack and helps either feed the team or make sure that we're all hydrated or make sure that we're all getting what we need during the day. So those are just sort of the family outliers that you could consider as part of the team. It's very hard to have friends at the racetrack. A quote from a friend was always, "We didn't come to make friends, we brought our own." And that's very true in the racing scenario just because it is so competitive. And when racers are out there, they're just focused on what they're doing. And if that's maybe a family member next to them, they don't know. And they'll put a door to you, they'll take you off the racetrack just to win that trophy. It's sad, but it's the way it is, and it's a lot of trash talking for sure. What happens at the shop between race days is that's ultimately our headquarters for where the race car is, all the tools and everything that we have to support the program. Everybody's responsibility is to show up at the shop on time, go take a task off the list, and tackle that project and run everything by the crew chief in terms of making sure that it's the way we want it and what we expect. We have not gone without our fair share. Everyone has of issues, whether mechanical, whether other drivers, whether getting caught up in something that we really had nothing to do with in terms of wrecks happening in front of us and just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. It could be anywhere from brakes failing, from the motor seizing to braking, suspension parts. Could be anything. It's anything and everything. We spend a lot of time at the shop making sure those problems don't come up, but it's unavoidable. When the motor blows up, the motor's going to blow up. There's nothing you can do about that.
Watch this looter stop. You got blue line by the arrows. Almost my phone.
You did?
Yeah. She was so focused on the tire.
Throw that door back on there.
Yeah. Hey, I got.
How do I handle the pressure of racing? The more I can clear my mind and stay relaxed while not in the race car, while my crew's preparing the car, the better for me, because then that adrenaline rush just becomes exhausting. And so the way I do it is I just focus on my family, I focus on having a good time, I focus on having chats with other people at the racetrack that have nothing to do with being on the racetrack. My family is really what keeps me calm and entertained on other things that have nothing to do with sitting inside a race car and being out on the track. Just keeping my mind blank. And then once I get in the race car, I don't remember anything, just because the focus is now on what I'm doing and the person that's in my ear telling me things, who becomes then my best friend, the only voice I have in my head. There's a quote that says, "Never race what's behind you, race what's in front of you." And the idea behind that is simply that if you're worried about what's behind you, then you're never racing out the front of your window, right? What's behind you is of no consequence. Unfortunately for me, I had a pretty bad accident that almost took me out of racing. Not because of the injury itself, just because of the scare. I was racing a large memorial event that was by invitation only, lots of cars, things like that. And I started mid-pack and made my way all the way up to second chasing down the leader, and a car that we were lapping spun out in front of me with 2 cars in front of me, and so I didn't see it. And when they split the car, I drove straight through it.
Please stay off the fence and everybody off the fence, off the fence, off the fence. It looked like the car
I don't remember a lot of it. My family was there. They were really scared. They said that it took me about 5 minutes to get out of the car. I don't remember that. I just remember getting out of the car as soon as I could. I took the rest of that year off, not to mention the car was pretty bad. And it took me 2 years to get back into full-time racing again before I was ready to do that. Like Ayrton Senna says, if you're not going for the gap anymore, you're no longer a racer. And that's what was happening with me. I started coaching of my former crew chief's son, and so now he races, 14 years old, great kid, very fast, very good driver. And he kind of got me motivated back into it again. My mom is my number 1 fan. She loves it. All she cares about is seeing me in the race car. She's the first one on the fence, just holding on to dear life to watch me go and just rooting me on and things like that. But then my fiance, she doesn't like it. And she's there to support me and would never miss a race, but she gets scared, especially after that accident. She was standing right at the fence where it happened, and she said she just couldn't get that image out of her head. So, yeah, I don't know. Some take it well, some don't. Most don't, I should say. Most don't. Have I ever thought of quitting? Many times. Too many times. And just because, there's always something else out there for me. I'm a pretty driven person. The reason I keep coming back to racing is because I haven't found something to substitute it with. It's sort of being an adrenaline junkie. Maybe someday when I find that next thing, I will focus on that. But for now, not quitting yet. Not quitting yet. And I wouldn't call it quitting, I'd call it retiring. But not yet.
That sounds good.